Hello everybody, this is Jack Dennis and welcome to our fly fishing and tying channel. I hope you're all having a good start to the new year and out tying a lot of flies. We started a couple of weeks ago with our Jack Dennis and Friends fly tying session. Our first one was with Dave Allison, and I'm going to be showing you some from the past. One of the things I've been involved with my fly tying career is setting up fly tying theaters and been involved with the many conclaves that fly fishing groups and clubs have over the country. And they really highlight tyers that you may not have ever met. And one of the best ones is one in Idaho, both the Western Idaho Expo and the Eastern Idaho Expo, which is in Idaho Falls. They've been doing these fly tying get-togethers for a long time. We're talking over 30 years. So I want to do some highlights from some that I filmed in 2009 and 2010. And you'll get a chance to meet some names you know, and maybe some names you didn't know. And one of the nice things about tying at these expos is all the excitement and sounds of people going around telling lots and lots of fly fishing stories. Most of them may be exaggerated. But one of the nice things about the theater is you get a chance to listen to the tyers talk about their experiences and answer questions. I think you're going to enjoy them. We're going to start this week with several. We'll try to give you the most information. And I know some of you are going to say, wow, you know, I don't know about the materials. Well, these are really uncut. So, you know, you do your best on figuring it out. But I think you're going to enjoy the interaction with the crowd and with the tyers. And really uncut and I think extremely fun. Let's get going.
Everybody knows my name's Leslie. I decided what I was going to do today is just tie three or four of my personal favorite patterns that I like to fish with. So what we're going to start with is a really simple midge pattern. It's called our CDC transitional midge. This is a really fun fly to fish with. A little bit difficult to see sometimes, but it is a really, really great pattern. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out, get my thread and my bobbin here. This fly typically, you're going to see about a size, probably about the biggest you're going to see it is probably about a size 20. We tie it all the way down to a size 24, but as everybody knows, midges can go all the way down to 26 and smaller. So, all right, for demonstration purposes today, I'm going to be tying this fly on a size 16, and like I said, this is just so you guys can see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just behind the eye of my hook, and I'm just going to cover the hook shank with thread. No particular, just get the thread on the hook shank. This is kind of a fun fly to tie. I'm sure any of you that tie with necks instead of the saddles, you get a lot of those little tiny micro hackles on the neck part of your cape. And on the very bottom, you're going to get these, you're going to find these little tiny hackles. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to incorporate this, and we're going to use this little tiny hackle tip as our tail on our midge. I like to tell people in general to use your hook shank as your measuring device. This is going to ensure that your tail, your wing, etc. is going to be as it would normally be. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this hackle tip, and I'm going to measure it on my hook shank. And when I'm talking about the hook shank, I'm talking just behind the eye of the hook, just back to where the hook, just before the hook starts to bend. So I'm going to take this hackle tip, and I'm going to tie it in just before that bend. And what I like to do when I'm tying pretty much any type of tail in, I like to bring my thread back, and I like to come just back to where that hook starts to bend down, and I'm going to make one wrap under that tail. And what that does, it does two things. It's going to bring the tail up level with the hook shank, and on many of the other patterns that we tie when we actually have the tail fibers, it's also going to help give the tail that natural splay. Thank you. Just going to cut off the butt of my hackle. Now we're going to take 2 CDC feathers. Anybody that's watched me tie or taken any of my workshops or my classes know that pretty much most of the flies that I do tie are CDC, done with CDC. A lot of people kind of have a fear of working with CDC because the feathers appear to be just really light and really flimsy. Don't be scared to work with it because it's very sturdy. As long as it's treated well after you fish it, it's going to last you a long, long time. And I know from experience, my father, my son, a lot of us have flies in our boxes that we've fished for 2 and 3 seasons with, as long as the CDC is treated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these feathers, and I'm going to take 2. This is light done. You can also tie these flies with a medium done or a darker wing to help with visibility and stuff. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take 2 CDC feathers, and all I'm going to do is spoon them on top of each other. I like to put the best feather on the bottom. So when I do bring this wing case over, can you guys see? If you can't see, just remind me. All right, I've spooned my feathers together. I've evened up my tips. I'm going to start from about the middle of the feather, and I'm going to pull all those fibers into the tip, and I'm going to pinch. Now I'm going to switch these feathers into my left hand, and I'm just going to secure these right on top of my tail tie down. And what I like to do, rather than positioning my wing case right immediately, I like to tie it in a little further back and then actually pull it into position. I'm going to bring my thread about halfway up the hook shank. And now we're going to incorporate some CDC legs into this pattern. And one of the neatest things about tying with CDC is there are so many different things that you can do with the actual fibers of the feather. You can use them for legs, you can use them for antennas, you can use them for tails. etc. It's just a really good all-around material. So when I select my legs, I like to find a feather that's usually pretty long and nice. I'm not really worried about the tips, and a lot of times when I'm tying this fly and several other patterns that I also tie with this same wing, a lot of times what I'll do, if I have a lot of long, nice fibers left at the bottom of my feather, when I clip that wing case off, I'll set those aside and come back at a later time and use those really long, nice fibers for the tails or legs as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to strip out all these little short, uneven fibers, and I'm going to take probably about 1/4 of one side of those fibers, and they pull off really easily, so you don't have to worry about struggling with them. And as you see, I've just pulled those straight off of the stem of the feather. Now, what we like to do anytime we're using CDC for legs on our fly is we actually like to use the butts of the CDC for our legs. And the reason that we like to do this is because it's a little bit more heavy, a little bit more durable, and it also helps to keep the legs in place when you tie them back and anchor them down. So what I'm going to do, I've got the butts of my legs, again, that I'm going to use for, or the butts of my CDC, excuse me, that I'm going to use for my legs. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut these little curls off. And that's just the little from the stem of the hook. And I'm just going to even up these fibers. A lot of people like to, when they're tying their legs in, a lot of people, or you'll see a lot of people tie them so they're actually positioning them, putting them right in, you know, angling or putting them towards the back of the hook or wherever. What we like to do is we actually like to extend our legs, tie them in about the middle point of where we want our legs to be. Now we're trimming out the tips. And you see I've got these really nice long fibers that extend far out away from the rest of the hook. And you're going to see in just a minute what I mean by, if you extend these out forward, once you tie them back and anchor them up against the body of your fly, they're going to stay where where you tied them. They're not going to be going every other different direction. I'm going to take some of our Harrop Pro dubbing. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I did. This is just a muskrat gray dubbing, and it's just a nice dry fly dubbing. But what I want to do is I'm just going to take, I don't think you can see, really small amounts of dubbing. One of the biggest struggles that most people have when they dub is they have a tendency to want to put too much dubbing on the thread. And you would be surprised just really how small of an amount of dubbing you need to actually tie your fly. What I like to do, as you can see, I dub with my left hand. There's a reason for that, not only because my dad told me when I first started tying flies that I was going to learn to dub with my left hand. Well, needless to say, I learned to dub with my left hand. I start the dubbing at the top of my thread. Once I've got that dubbing just secured on around the hook shank, I come up and I kind of just distribute my dubbing evenly down my thread. And as you can see, I've actually started dubbing in the middle of the fly instead of in the back. The reason for doing this is if you struggle, I not only do it when I'm working close to the eye of my hook, but I also do it anytime that I'm going to be using legs in my fly, or anything that requires a shoulder that I need to mark where I'm tying. All right, as you see, we've tied about half this hook shank with this muskrat gray dubbing, and you see that I've left that little, kind of a little shoulder at the end of the dubbing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come back to these really long CDC fibers that are extended out the front, and we're just going to take half of them to the inside, and we've got that shoulder, so we're going to anchor, really tie that thread up against that dubbing shoulder, and then we're going to do it again on the outside. And you can see I'm really using that shoulder to lock those legs in place, and you can see they're there. They're not going anywhere. Now I'm going to take a little bit more of the natural dubbing, and I'm basically going to do the same thing that I did with the back half of the fly, because this fly has a pull-over wing case. I'm going to start my dubbing maybe about 1/8 of the way back from the eye of my hook, and I'm just going to work the dubbing back against the hook. Lost my train of thought for a minute. Okay, as you can see, I need just a little bit more dubbing to finish off the fly. And again, I'm using the same technique. I'm just getting my dubbing started around my thread, and once I get it going, then I'm going to work at distributing it. And if you're watching as I dub and wrap, any of you that tie a lot of flies can see the advantage of learning to dub with your left hand, because you can keep your left hand right here under your vise, right by your thread, and each time you come around, you can tighten that dubbing. And the worst possible thing in the world to make your flies sink, everybody knows, is loose dubbing. So, just a little tip, if you can train yourself to do that, it definitely speeds up your tying. Alright, so what I've done is I've just kind of formed a cone shape with my dubbing. Now I'm going to take these 2 CDC feathers, and this bubble wing is really an easy technique. Anybody that's tied any kind of nymphs or anything with a marabou wing can relate to this. And all I do when I tie my bubble wings is I just lay the 2 feathers down on top, and I just kind of give it just a little push back, and I'm keeping these feathers pinched between my fingers. We don't want a really big bubble on this fly, just kind of a little bit of a bump. I'm going to make 1 wrap to secure my CDC, and then I'm going to make a couple more wraps just to make sure it's anchored where it needs to be. And now I'm going to bring these 2 feathers up, and right against the base of this feather underneath, I'm going to make about 4 or 5 really secure wraps right up tight against the base. And then I'm going to take my whip finisher, and I'm going to whip finish as well, right up really tight against the base of that wing. And anybody that's had any experience tying, the nymphs or, some of the other patterns that have the little tuft, I call it, of CDC or really any type of feather on when you're tying a wing case this particular way, you run a chance of having the eye of your hook clogged with the materials and stuff that you're working with. So what I've learned to do when I cut my CDC is I'm just going to hold it straight up, and I come in with my scissors at a really sharp angle to the back of the hook, and I just make one clean snip. Sometimes you have to groom it and get all the, but you can see you not only have those little gills or that little tuft of CDC as on the head of your fly, but you also have a clear eye of your hook. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim my legs into place. We want these legs to extend just a little ways, not even a little ways, probably right about even with the end of our hook shank. I'm going to cut them on both sides. I like to cut mine separately just because then I know it's even and I've got the same amount of fibers on both sides. All right, a little bit of head cement. Like I said in the beginning when I started tying this fly, you can also put a darker wing on this specific pattern to help with visibility. Same exact technique using black CDC and black dubbing to do a black midge. It's, you know, kind of what the tyer, I guess, is looking to, what type of a result you're looking to come up with. Any questions on this particular fly? Oh, come on. Help me make this. All right, I'm just going to sit this here.